Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a friendship, right? One that's incredibly important on the world stage, full of massive promise, shared democratic values, all that good stuff. But it's also riddled with these incredibly stubborn challenges and some really tough truths that, frankly, often go unsaid. That's exactly what we're diving into today. The intricate and, let's be honest, sometimes deeply frustrating dynamics between two huge democracies, the United States and India. And just a heads up, this isn't going to be one of those polite, surface-level chats. We're going to take a really candid, unfiltered look. We plan to lay bare some significant friction points, some deeper systemic issues, stuff that can be pretty uncomfortable to confront, but you absolutely need to understand it. Our mission today is really to distill the most important insights on this complex relationship. We're going to focus particularly on those friction points, those underlying systemic problems that can make a true partnership, well, difficult.
And it's so crucial to grasp that this relationship, despite its huge strategic importance and obvious potential, it faces very real, very tangible hurdles. We'll be exploring not just the economic and geopolitical stuff, but also those deeply ingrained societal and internal challenges within India that fundamentally shape how these two nations interact. It's a complex tapestry, really, woven with ambition, yes, but also a lot of frustration. And our aim is to unravel it piece by piece, revealing not just what the issues are, but digging into why they persist and what the broader implications are for both countries.
Okay, so let's kick things off with something incredibly tangible, the economic relationship. We've heard some really blunt observations lately, haven't we? Putting a bright spotlight on India's trade policies. The general feeling out there, and it's been voiced pretty loudly by some, is that India's tariffs are simply, far too high. Makes it a tough market to really crack. And this isn't just, casual complaining. It feels like a direct challenge to the very foundation of the economic partnership.
That's a very accurate way to put it. When you actually dig into the numbers, the official reports, those blunt comments certainly carry weight, significant weight. India's average applied tariff, for instance, it hovers around 17%.
17%? Wow. Compared to the U.S.
Exactly. To give you some perspective, the U.S. average tariff typically sits way lower, often between, say, 2 and 3%. So it's a dramatic difference. And these aren't just abstract numbers, right? They translate into very concrete, sometimes staggering, import duties on specific things that foreign companies want to sell in India. Let's look at some examples. They're quite striking. If you're a foreign car maker wanting to import a car into India, the duties can easily hit an eye-watering 100%.
100%.
Yes. Effectively doubles the cost of the car before it even gets near a showroom. Makes it almost impossible to compete with cars made locally. Or take luxury goods, alcohol. You're often looking at tariffs of 50% or more. Again, pushes prices way up, creates a very niche market. And it's not just high-end stuff. Agricultural products, think almonds, apples, they also face really big tariffs, mostly to protect India's huge network of local farmers. Historically, India has kept these protectionist policies as a cornerstone of its economic thinking. The goal was to shield domestic industries, especially small-scale producers, from global competition. So while the stated aim was, self-reliance, supporting local manufacturing, local agriculture, the undeniable result has been a major restriction on foreign companies trying to expand competitively in India.
Okay, 100% on cars is, it's huge and pretty transparent, I suppose. At least you know what you're facing. But you could argue tariffs are clear, right? What about those less visible, non-monetary barriers? We hear so much frustration about what some call strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers. Okay. Are those maybe even more frustrating because they're harder to pin down?
That's a really sharp distinction. Yes, these non-monetary trade barriers, or NTBs as they're often called, they refer to regulations, practices that don't involve a direct tax, but they make imports incredibly difficult, costly, or sometimes just impossible. And yes, the frustration you hear from exporters, not just from the U.S., but globally, it's a constant theme, precisely because these barriers are often opaque, unpredictable, they're hard to plan for. Let's break down some of the common ones. First, you've got licensing and quotas. For certain imports, especially in industries India sees as sensitive, think defense, telecom, even some food products, getting the necessary license can be just incredibly cumbersome. It's often a prolonged, non-transparent process, can stretch out for months, sometimes years, creates huge uncertainty for businesses.
Months or years, wow.
Yeah. Then you have the ongoing challenges with customs and the bureaucracy in general. Foreign businesses constantly report significant, often inexplicable delays in customs clearance. They get bogged down by excessive paperwork, seemingly redundant stuff, face high compliance costs. It creates persistent bottlenecks in their supply chains. The U.S. Trade Representative's office, they frequently get complaints about arbitrary inspections, the sheer volume of documents needed, often far exceeding international norms. Another major hurdle: product standards. The Bureau of Indian Standards, the BIS, imposes strict domestic requirements, and these often differ significantly from established international norms.
Meaning companies have to.
Meaning foreign firms have to do expensive, time-consuming retesting, or even modify their products just for the Indian market. Adds huge cost, time, complexity. Similarly, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, SPS, for food and agricultural imports. These involve rigorous safety checks. Now, ostensibly, they're for consumer protection, right?
You'd assume so?
But they are sometimes criticized by trade partners as being, disproportionately burdensome, or even protectionist in practice, effectively keeping certain foreign products out. And finally, a growing concern, especially for American tech companies, is data localization. Rules mandating local storage of data. You hear giants like Google, Amazon, MasterCard raise this. It undeniably increases operational costs, requires significant infrastructure investment, adds layers of complexity. The United States Trade Representative, the USTR, consistently lists India as having one of the most restrictive trade regimes globally. Their detailed 2024 report specifically highlighted India's non-transparent, burdensome, non-tariff barriers as a major deterrent for U.S. companies. A really stark example: the U.S. dairy industry. It's been effectively shut out of India. Why? Specific restrictions requiring cattle to be fed only vegetarian feed.
Vegetarian feed?
Yes. A standard that American farmers argue is not just impractical for their established practices, but also basically a discriminatory trade barrier.
So these aren't just minor annoyances, they're real obstacles.
Exactly. Yeah. Substantial obstacles that force businesses to rethink everything, or sometimes just walk away from India altogether.
So it's clear the economic friction is deep, it's multifaceted, but this isn't just about trade figures and regulations, is it? It's also about strategic alignment. And speaking of strategy, India's deep-rooted ties with Russia, increasingly prominent ties, especially in critical sectors like defense and energy, that presents another major point of contention. Seems like it goes beyond simple economics into a really complex geopolitical dance.
That's absolutely right. India's historical and current relationship with Russia is a huge factor in its global standing. And yes, it very frequently creates friction with Western nations, especially the U.S. For decades, India has relied heavily on Russia, and before that, the Soviet Union, for the vast majority of its military gear.
How much are we talking?
Estimates suggest somewhere between 60 to 70% of India's defense hardware, including critical assets, the real backbone of its military, originates from Russia. We're talking advanced stuff like Sukhoi 30 fighter jets, the S-400 missile defense systems, even leased nuclear submarines. This deep military relationship isn't new. It dates back to the Cold War, when India, while part of the non-aligned movement, leaned heavily on Soviet support for defense. And beyond the military hardware, energy ties have become, an increasingly prominent point of discussion and contention. Since the Russia-Ukraine conflict started in early 2022, India has dramatically increased its imports of discounted Russian crude oil.
Significantly increased.
Hugely. It rapidly became one of Russia's top global buyers, right alongside China. This increased reliance on Russian energy, especially now, with heightened international sanctions against Moscow. It presents a really complex diplomatic and strategic challenge for the U.S. and its allies, who are trying to isolate Russia economically. Now, India, for its part, steadfastly defends these ties. They pride to their doctrine of strategic autonomy.
Strategic autonomy.
Right. It's rooted in their long-standing non-alignment policy. The idea is to maintain relationships with various global powers, Russia, the U.S., Europe, without being forced to pick sides in global fights. The argument from New Delhi is basically, our foreign policy is independent, it serves our national interests, and those interests include diversifying sources for defense and energy. However, from a Western viewpoint, especially in some U.S. policy circles, this is often seen as a zero-sum game. Meaning the argument made is that India's continued purchases of Russian energy and military gear indirectly fund Moscow's actions in Ukraine, thus undermining the broader international effort to pressure Russia. This creates a real tension, between the stated values of the U.S. and India's pragmatic strategic choices.
And the language we've heard around this issue has been pretty direct, hasn't it? Even dismissive sometimes. We've seen statements like, India has always bought a vast majority of its military equipment from Russia and are Russia's largest buyer of energy at a time when everyone wants Russia to stop the killing in Ukraine, all things not good. That's quite blunt. And then even more pointedly, I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their economies down together for all I care. That's not your typical diplomatic language, is it? Feels very unvarnished.
No, it's certainly not traditional diplomatic speak. It's remarkably unvarnished. And it reflects, I think, a profound level of frustration within certain Western policy circles. That dismissive tone suggests a view that India's neutrality on Ukraine isn't just neutrality, it's seen as actively undermining collective efforts to isolate Russia. It implies India's ties aren't just strategic autonomy, but actually an impediment to a unified front against Moscow. This perspective often, perhaps, overlooks the complex historical and economic realities shaping India's policy. And it's important to contextualize this, too. India is far from alone in keeping these trade ties. Many countries across Asia, Africa, Latin America have continued trade with Russia, often for pragmatic economic reasons, discounted oil, crucial defense parts, things like that. Their national interests often dictate a more diversified approach than full alignment with one bloc.
Right, it's not just India.
Exactly. And this specific direct calling out of foreign leaders like Dmitry Medvedev, that's also characteristic of a certain, shall we say, personal style in foreign relations we've seen, not just with Russia, sometimes even with NATO allies, the EU, China. This blunt public approach, while maybe intended to signal toughness, can certainly escalate tensions and complicate diplomacy rather than simplifying it, often makes finding common ground harder.
Okay, so given all this friction, this blunt language, it raises a really important question. What are the actual real-world implications if these strong statements, these potential actions, especially around trade, actually happen? Could we be heading towards something as serious as a trade war? And what would that even look like for both countries and the wider global economy?
Well, the threat of new tariffs, specifically a 25% tariff plus a penalty, potentially starting as soon as August 1st, that signals a very serious escalation. If that materialized, it would undoubtedly set the stage for, yes, a full-blown trade war between two major economic partners, the immediate impact. It would hit a whole range of Indian exports to the U.S. Think critical sectors, steel, aluminum, textiles, and crucially, IT services, which are a cornerstone of India's economy.
IT services, too. That's huge for India.
Absolutely huge. Major Indian companies, industrial giants like Tata Steel, automakers like Mahindra, IT powerhouses like Infosys, they'd find their competitiveness in the vital U.S. market severely damaged. Could lead to reduced profits, significant loss of market share, potentially job losses within India. However, tariffs are rarely a one-way street, are they? They almost always have significant reciprocal impacts, often leading to a lose-lose situation.
So it could backfire on the U.S. as well.
Definitely. Such tariffs could directly backfire by increasing prices for American businesses and consumers. For example, higher tariffs on Indian generic drugs. That could directly mean increased costs for American healthcare, ultimately hitting patients at the pharmacy. Similarly, tariffs on India's huge IT services sector could raise operational costs for U.S. tech firms, potentially slowing innovation or increasing consumer prices for services relying on Indian expertise. It's a complex economic dance where hurting one side almost always means increased costs for the other. And geopolitically, these remarks, these potential actions, they come at an incredibly delicate time. The U.S.-India partnership is widely seen as absolutely crucial for counterbalancing China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific.
Right. The China factor is always there.
Always. Disrupting this partnership over trade could significantly weaken a vital strategic alliance that both nations rely on for regional stability. It's also worth noting, India is actively negotiating big trade deals with others, Europe, the UK, Canada. But it's remained notably cautious about a comprehensive free trade agreement with the U.S., partly because of these persistent friction points. Furthermore, in the volatile global energy markets, India's purchase of discounted Russian oil has, perhaps ironically, helped keep global oil prices lower than they might have been. That's a quiet benefit the U.S. economy has enjoyed, dampening inflation.
Interesting point.
And lastly, you always have to consider the domestic angle, especially in an election cycle. Such strong remarks might also be aimed primarily at domestic voters, signaling toughness on trade, rather than being purely a calculated long-term foreign policy move.
That is a truly intricate web of consequences. What's fascinating is the potential ripple effect. If these threats really turn into policy, what are the potential consequences? It sounds like much more than just percentage points on imports. It could reshape diplomatic ties, market dynamics.
Absolutely. The immediate fallout could be quite severe and multifaceted. We could swiftly see trade retaliation from India. It wouldn't be the first time. We saw it in 2019, remember? India imposed counter tariffs on specific U.S. goods, things like Harley-Davidson motorcycles, almonds, apples, in response to American trade actions. That tit-for-tat could escalate fast.
Hurting industries on both sides.
Exactly. Then, beyond economics, there's the significant risk of diplomatic strain. Sour U.S. India ties would be particularly damaging right now. Think about the QEOB, the U.S., India, Japan, Australia dialogue, and various defense partnerships. They're designed to tackle broader geopolitical challenges, especially China. A breakdown in trust could have far-reaching implications for regional stability, might embolden rivals, and of course significant tariffs, rising tensions that would almost certainly affect global market reactions, impacting stock markets, supply chains. Companies heavily reliant on India-U.S. trade could lead to investment instability. The ramifications would stretch far beyond just D.C. and New Delhi.
Okay, so beyond these high-level policy talks and the geopolitical chess game, there's this other layer to doing business in India, one that many American firms describe as, well, deeply challenging. The persistent, pervasive issue of corruption. It feels like the elephant in the room, doesn't it? Often discussed quietly, if at all.
That's a very apt description. This is where the promise of a vast market bumps up against the often problematic realities on the ground. India, yes, it's the world's most populous democracy, rapidly growing economy. It presents a tantalizing market. Huge consumer base, over 1.4 billion people, youthful demographic, growing middle class, an undeniable growth story,
Right.
geopolitically vital, a democratic ally against China in the Indo-Pacific, and talent-wise, immense tech talent, global IT back office, top STEM professionals, and the trade volume itself is already significant. Bilateral trade hit $191 billion in 2024. U.S. exports 76 dollaries, imports $115 B. Covers everything from energy and machinery to pharmaceuticals and IT services. So a robust relationship on paper. However, despite these impressive figures, despite strengthening strategic ties, India still ranks only around 10th among U.S. trading partners, lags way behind China, Mexico, Canada.
Why the discrepancy?
It highlights a fundamental issue. U.S. firms consistently describe India as one of the most difficult major markets to navigate globally. Beyond the high tariffs, we talked about 100% on cars, 150% on alcohol, 40% on solar panels, over 22% on medical devices, making pricing incredibly hard. There are the non-tariff barriers. Opaque standards, slow certifications, BIS can take years, local sourcing mandates, restrictive licenses, unpredictable regulatory shifts, especially in tech and agriculture, and then the pervasive customs delays and import bottlenecks. Companies openly complain about multiple, often arbitrary inspections, excessive documentation, and, quite tellingly, the frequent need for local facilitators.
Local facilitators. A euphemism, I take it.
A widely understood euphemism, yes, often meaning informal payments expected to smooth the process. This isn't just inefficiency. It hints at something deeper, more systemic.
Right, so it sounds like those initial trade barriers are just the entry fee, almost. A visible symptom of something much deeper that businesses face once they're actually on the ground. So connecting this to the bigger picture, many companies find tariffs and NTBs are just the tip of the iceberg. The real elephant in the room, for many, is this deeper issue of entrenched corruption. Where does this corruption hit U.S. businesses hardest? What does it actually look like in practice?
That's a crucial distinction. While corruption isn't unique to India, of course, its pervasiveness, the specific ways it's embedded in bureaucratic processes, it's deeply problematic, especially for U.S. firms. For them, this isn't abstract. It affects specific daily operations. Firstly, customs and logistics. Major, persistent pain points. It's widely reported that speed money is often expected for faster customs clearance at major ports like Nhava-Sheva, Chennai, Kolkata. There are well-established informal networks dominating these hubs, and foreign companies, particularly, often find themselves targeted. Arbitrary fines, unexplained delays, with the clear implication that an unofficial payment will make the problem disappear. Creates unpredictable costs, major supply chain disruptions. Secondly, public procurement. Notoriously opaque, rife with challenges. In U.S. defense and aerospace firms, for instance, have reported facing rig tenders where the bidding seems predetermined. They complain about inexplicable payment delays for services already rendered. Contracts awarded based more on political connections than merit. Frequent allegations of needing an agent fee or success fee, often disguised as consulting charges, just to get approval or even get shortlisted. Thirdly, getting licensing and regulatory approvals. This is particularly thorny. Approvals for everything, drug manufacturing, telecom licenses, food safety certifications, they're infamous for prolonged delay tactics, unless unofficial payments or significant political influence are involved.
So pay to play, essentially.
That's the implication many face. It's led to a situation where many U.S. medical device firms, food exporters, despite the huge market potential, choose to avoid or even pull out of India altogether, just to avoid these hidden costs and the serious ethical and legal dilemmas they pose under U.S. law, like the FCPA. Finally, local government corruption. Varies by state, but can be incredibly intense, especially in sectors like construction, energy, infrastructure, logistics. U.S. warehouse developers, for example, report facing persistent shakedowns for basic permits, enduring multiple redundant inspections designed to extract payments. Even outright extortion from local officials or unions makes forecasting costs or timelines accurately almost impossible. And to really illustrate this, there are numerous real cases that have surfaced. A U.S. solar panel maker reportedly pulled out after investing significantly, citing endless graft from customs right through to local land registration. Another U.S. defense firm was allegedly blacklisted from major government contracts after refusing to pay a commission supposedly demanded by a political intermediary. American pharma firms have raised grave concerns about perceived unscientific rejections by regulators for drug approvals. Unless high-priced lobbyists were paid to intervene and smooth the process.
These aren't just isolated incidents then.
No. Collectively, they paint a consistent, deeply troubling picture of systemic challenges that actively deter foreign investment.
That's a comprehensive and, frankly, pretty disheartening picture. It makes you ask, what is the U.S. government's official stance on all this? Is this just anecdotal feedback from frustrated businesses, or is it a widely recognized, officially acknowledged problem?
Oh, it is absolutely a recognized and officially acknowledged problem, systematically documented in various U.S. government reports. Take the USTR Special 301 report for 2024. It focuses on intellectual property rights and market access worldwide. It consistently lists India for significant challenges, including lack of IP protection, discriminatory standards, weak rule of law, and notably for having barriers that require corruption to navigate. That's official USTR language. And it's not new, it's a recurring theme in their annual assessments. Furthermore, the U.S. Embassy in India and its commercial service, U.S India, they routinely issue direct, explicit warnings to American businesses operating or considering India. They strongly advise thorough local due diligence, hiring reputable risk consultants. They explicitly caution against dealing in cash or relying on informal middlemen for approvals. And crucially, they instruct companies to report any bribe demands directly to Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA units, underscoring the U.S. commitment to anti-bribery laws. Despite these clear warnings, despite the known opportunities, many small and mid-sized U.S. enterprises choose to avoid India altogether. Their reasoning is stark, consistent. The opportunity is real, but the risk, ambiguity, and corruption make it not worth it.
Not worth it. That's a powerful statement.
It really is. It clearly indicates that for many businesses, especially those without huge resources, the potential rewards just don't outweigh the significant, persistent challenges of navigating that environment.
It also makes you wonder why this persists. What's fascinating here is understanding the roots. It's not just a few bad apples. It seems profoundly systemic. What are the structural, cultural, political factors keeping this going?
You're absolutely right to call it systemic. It's not isolated incidents. It's deeply ingrained, rooted in a complex mix of structural, cultural, and political factors that have allowed corruption to fester, even normalize, over decades. From a structural perspective, India's legal and administrative framework is notoriously complex, often contradictory. Overlapping laws, ministries, incredibly intricate tax codes, a labyrinthine licensing regime creates numerous discretionary points for officials.
Opportunities for graft, essentially.
Exactly. This complexity is often exploited. Add to that a massive judicial backlog. Corruption cases can drag on for years, decades even, leads to a lack of effective enforcement for existing anti-corruption laws. Impunity fuels more corruption. There's also a significant, well-documented political business nexus. Illicit ties between politicians and corporations create an environment ripe for corruption favors exchanged for contracts or policy changes. Then you have the cultural and political factors reinforcing this. There's a prevailing attitude sometimes called chalta hai, loosely translates to it's okay or it happens.
And a kind of resignation.
A kind of resignation, yes. It unfortunately normalizes petty corruption, bureaucratic inefficiency, creates passive acceptance. This is compounded by what's often called crony capitalism, where success can depend more on connections, political favors, illicit payments, than on merit or fair competition. The heavy reliance on cash in elections, especially locally, also fuels the cycle. Illicit money plays a big role in political funding, creating a need for funds often acquired corruptly. And finally, the protection of influential business families, sometimes across generations, contributes. Established interests can manipulate rules, often at the expense of fair competition. Creates a very high barrier for honest businesses.
That explanation of Chalta-High and crony capitalism paints a very clear picture. Now, connecting this globally, how does India stack up against other emerging markets companies might consider? Is this level of difficulty unique or just par for the course in fast-developing economies?
That's a critical comparison, and it helps frame India's unique challenges. While you often hear India compared favorably to China, more democratic, the actual experience on the ground regarding ease of doing business can be quite different, especially for smaller companies. Let's quickly compare a few aspects. China, huge market, immense scale, but highly restrictive, high corruption risk. And while centralized control offers some predictability, sudden policy shifts or crackdowns add unpredictability. India, also huge, growing market, democratically structured, signals openness. But very high corruption risk, as we've discussed, and crucially, low predictability in regulations and enforcement. This combo, high corruption risk, low predictability, is a major differentiator. Businesses value stability. Now, compare that to, say, Vietnam or Indonesia, often seen as alternatives in Asia. Vietnam, medium market size, moderately open, medium corruption risk, but offers relatively high predictability in its regulatory environment. That's a huge draw. Indonesia, large, growing market, improving openness, medium corruption risk, medium predictability.
So predictability is key.
Absolutely key. What this comparison highlights is that while some corruption might exist elsewhere, the predictability of the operating environment is paramount. In India, that combination of high corruption risk and low predictability makes it particularly challenging. Consequently, yes, Vietnam and Indonesia are increasingly preferred alternatives for companies seeking access to Asia without navigating India's specific entrenched hurdles.
Okay, so given these deep-seated challenges, what can actually be done? Are there clear, actionable paths forward for India to address this internally and for U.S. businesses to navigate it in the meantime?
Yes, there are definitely clear steps, though they require significant political will and sustained effort. For India itself, fundamental reforms are needed to unlock its potential. This includes simplifying complex business laws, especially around GST and customs, would dramatically reduce friction points, opportunities for graft. Strengthening anti-corruption enforcement is paramount. Existing laws often go unenforced. Robust investigation, prosecution are vital. Digitizing, streamlining bureaucratic approvals would remove many opportunities for unofficial payments, reduce delays. Protecting whistleblowers, independent journalists who expose corruption crucial for transparency. And fundamentally, dismantling the entrenched license Raj culture. That historical system of excessive licenses and regulations granted huge discretionary power to bureaucrats, fueling corruption. Modernizing that is critical. Now, for U.S. businesses, given the current reality, a more cautious, strategic, informed approach is highly advisable. Absolutely crucial to partner with thoroughly vetted Indian firms. Extensive due diligence is needed. Using FCPA-compliant auditors is non-negotiable. Protects against legal issues back home. Companies should carefully consider avoiding industries with high regulatory discretion unless they can secure strong protections. And finally, advocating for reforms through chambers like AmCham India or the U.S. India Business Council, USIDC, can help collectively pressure for change, share best practices, provide a unified voice. It's about entering the market with eyes wide open.
That's practical advice. And to really bring these challenges home, the stories of global giants like Ford, Apple, even Enron, they offer a stark, sobering look at the real consequences. It's one thing to talk policies in abstract, another to see how they actually impact or even defeat huge corporations.
These are indeed powerful case studies, really bring the abstract into sharp focus. Take Ford, entered India mid-90s, immense optimism, poured over $2 billion in, built state-of-the-art plants, yet by 2021, after years in the red, struggling for profitability, they exited manufacturing entirely.
Why beyond just sales figures?
Insiders consistently pointed to internal dysfunctions, archaic labor laws, land acquisition roadblocks, bureaucratic harassment, unclear or abruptly shifting policies undermining planning. Ford found itself entangled in state-level extortion demands, arbitrary tax changes, endless dealership disputes. A former exec famously said, "India didn't have one bureaucracy, it has 29, and every one of them wants a cut." Compounded by India's notoriously slow legal system. Justice delayed is justice denied. Then there's Apple, arguably the world's most valuable company, struggled for over a decade to make significant inroads in India, despite huge potential.
What held them back?
Foreign investment caps delayed opening official Apple stores, crucial for their brand. Mandatory 30% local sourcing rules kept them out of direct retail for years. Getting approvals for stores Factory expansions often required ministerial nudges. Insiders admit this often meant backdoor lobbying or unofficial payments. Their key suppliers, Foxconn, Wistron, were plagued by customs and tax harassment, leading to worker riots, factory shutdowns. Apple only slowly expanded after agreeing to significant Make in India manufacturing, bending to local interests that deviated from their global model. The lesson often cited, India's system doesn't respect rules, it respects power. And finally, Enron. Now synonymous with scandal, but its Indian venture is a classic business school case study of systemic disaster. 1990s poured $2.9 billion into the Dabhol power plant, intended to supply huge amounts of electricity.
But it collapsed, right?
Collapsed spectacularly. Corruption reportedly embedded at every stage. Land acquisition, energy pricing, a tangled web of alleged bribes to politicians, bureaucrats. Shifting political alliances turned against the project. Non-payment by the state electricity board. Ultimately collapse. While Enron failed globally due to internal fraud, India's chaotic, corrupt environment played a major role in killing that specific project. Sent a chilling message, the stark lesson. No amount of legal contracts can protect you in India when the system itself is broken.
Cautionary tales indeed.
Absolutely. They underscore the deep-seated systemic nature of these challenges.
Those individual cases paint a stark picture. And it's not just that the rules are complex, it's they're often weaponized. What's truly fascinating here is how these struggles reveal a broader, systemic issue of unpredictability.
Precisely. The core problem, as many who've tried business in India will tell you, is that it often feels like, in India, 1 + 1 = 8. Almost never. Doing business there feels less like straightforward economics, more like navigating a political thriller. The rules themselves, often vague by design, open to interpretation, enforcement, notoriously selective. This deliberate ambiguity creates an environment where invisible stakeholders, local mafia, political fixers, intermediaries are always present, expecting their cut.
So even official decisions aren't safe.
Often not. Government decisions clear on paper can be overridden by back-channel pressures. You can win a contract fair and square based on merit, competitive bidding, and still lose it to someone with a connection to the right minister's driver or whose family has political lineage. This isn't just a few bad actors, it's institutionalized unpredictability, where connections often trump legal process. The actual cost of compliance becomes incredibly high. Not because laws are strict, but because they're constantly reinterpreted or weaponized by vested interests to extract payments or block competition. It's a system that, in many ways, thrives on chaos.
That institutionalized unpredictability sounds exhausting for businesses. But look, this isn't just about foreign companies, is it? If we connect this to the bigger picture, this same system takes an incredibly heavy toll on India's own people. It's a domestic challenge as much as an international one.
That's a crucial observation, and perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect. The same dysfunction frustrating foreign firms fundamentally impacts the daily lives, the aspirations of Indian citizens. Consider the millions of farmers, crushed by predatory loan sharks, rigged procurement systems denying fair prices, struggling despite back-breaking labor caught in cycles of debt, then the aspiring middle-class entrepreneurs, dynamic individuals with ideas, drowning in GST complications a reform meant to simplify, facing the inspector raj, harassment, arbitrary enforcement, demands for payments just for basic permits, their spirit dampened by a system rewarding compliance over innovation. And then, maybe most tragically, the youth. India's huge demographic dividend, spending years prepping for exams, navigating complex quotas for education, jobs. Only to often find merit takes a backseat to money, caste, family legacy. The system disproportionately benefits the entrenched rich, exploits the poor, and perhaps most damagingly, actively drives away its most talented and ambitious young people, a fundamental misallocation of human capital.
That really brings the human cost into focus, and it leads us straight to a crucial point. If the system isn't reliably rewarding merit, where do the best minds go? It turns out India's greatest export might actually be its own people, the brain drain.
Exactly. This isn't just anecdotal. It's a profound demographic intellectual outflow. Every year, hundreds of thousands of India's brightest minds, often IIT, IM graduates, leave. They go to the U.S., Europe, increasingly Middle East, Canada, Australia. Why? Fundamentally simple. In the U.S., for instance, talent is largely rewarded based on merit, skills, hard work. In India, sadly, factors like birth, family name, connections, caste often matter more than brilliance or capability. In America, a talented engineer can realistically become CEO. In India, those top seats often seem reserved by powerful names, established dynasties. The path for true meritocrats is much harder. The proof, vividly evident. Look at the sheer number of Indian origin leaders at the helm of the world's biggest companies, based in the U.S. Sundar Pichai at Alphabet Google, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Shantanu Narayan at Adobe, Arvind Krishna at IBM, Neil Mohan at YouTube, Laxman Narasimhan at Starbucks, Nikesh Arora at Palo Alto Networks, Sanjay Mehrotra at Micron, Raj Subramaniam at FedEx, twin brothers George and Thomas Kurian leading NetApp and Google Cloud. The list just goes on and on. Beyond corporate giants, significant government, policy roles in the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, whose mother was Indian, Vivek Murthy, Surgeon General, Ajay Banga, World Bank President, academia, law, science, Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, economist Raghuram Rajan, former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, innovators like Vinod Khosla, Samgita Bhatia. These aren't exceptions. They are powerful examples of what happens when merit is recognized, cultivated, rewarded without systemic hindrance. Most got foundational education in India, often struggled against its systems, found their voice, opportunity, recognition in the U.S.
So India gave them roots.
India gave them their roots, excellent foundational education. America, in a profound sense, gave them their wings, allowed their talent to flourish without the obstacles faced back home. Represents a huge, ongoing loss of human capital for India.
That's a truly powerful observation.
Yeah.
India gave them their roots. America gave them their wings. So what does this consistent brain drain and the reasons for it say about the business landscape within India itself? Is it genuinely open, meritocratic, or still dominated by older, entrenched structures?
It's a critical question, gets to the heart of India's internal economic dynamics. While India has seen a genuine startup boom, vibrant innovation, new entrepreneurs, the reality is the established business elite largely remains a closed club. Most of India's biggest conglomerates, Tatas, Ambanis, Adanis, Birlas, Bajaj, are still predominantly family-run dynasties.
Meaning access is limited?
Meaning access to critical capital, key networks, decision-makers, often flows preferentially within these established circles, not necessarily to the best ideas or most deserving entrepreneurs outside that network. Top echelons remain largely inaccessible to outsiders, and this dynastic tendency isn't just private sector. Even public sector appointments, bureaucracy, state-owned enterprises, even judicial roles frequently riddled with nepotism. Family connections, political loyalties, caste affiliations often outweigh qualifications, experience, merit. The implicit message for many aspiring professionals is clear. If you're not born into the right family or don't have powerful connections, you often need significant cash or be willing to compromise your ethics to reach the pinnacle. Perpetuates a system that, despite outward dynamism, can feel deeply entrenched, resistant to pure meritocracy, fundamentally unfair for those outside the privileged few. Major internal hurdle.
This brings us to a particularly interesting, maybe uncomfortable observation. India is clearly not short on intelligence, not by a long shot. But some argue it struggles with tolerance for independent intelligence. What happens when brilliance dares to challenge the system? How does India treat its own intellectuals, its independent thinkers?
That's a profound observation, highlighting a deeply troubling paradox. India is indeed a nation of brilliant minds, capable of incredible intellectual feats. However, there's a recurring pattern. Independent thought, especially challenging the political status quo or entrenched power, can be met with significant resistance, marginalization, even outright suppression. We see this vividly through several prominent figures. Take Shashi Tharoor, Oxford-educated, former UN Undersecretary General, respected diplomat, prolific author, now MP, represents an intellectual, global, visionary approach many hope for, yet consistently sidelined within his own party. Subjected to online trolling, mocked for his sophisticated vocabulary seen by some as too Western, out of touch. Relegated to eloquent debater, not empowered in key decision roles. Celebrated globally, often treated as ornamental domestically. The underlying sentiment seems to be genuine clarity, eloquence aren't always welcomed, independent intellect seen as too dangerous to empower, an unaligned critical mind not fully trusted if it questions the narrative. Then there's Subramanian Swamy. Truly fearless, brilliant, Harvard PhD economics, former IIT professor, played a role in 1991 liberalization, fiercely nationalistic but also profoundly rational, staunch anti-corruption crusader, unafraid to challenge powerful figures, even within his own party.
What was his reward?
His reward for unyielding truth-telling. Despite contributions, intellectual pedigree, 0 ministerial roles under the party he helped bring to power, reportedly blacklisted from primetime TV debates, perceived as too dangerous for the corridors of power, a clear illustration. Speaking truth without fear or favor can be a career-ending trait in India. And finally, consider Raghuram Rajan, Globally respected economist, IMF chief economist, Chicago professor, India's youngest RBI governor, or a rock star central banker. Returned to serve with integrity. Bravely warned early about bad loans, crony capitalism, raised concerns about demonetization. Ideas bold, data-backed, globally respected.
But he left after one term.
He refused to sing political songs, compromise independent analysis for political expediency. This stance led to his quiet, rather abrupt departure back to America. Suggests he left not because he failed India, but because India, in a sense, refused to protect him from political wolves seeking to silence or manipulate his independent voice.
So those are incredibly revealing examples. What does this all mean? Why were these brilliant voices clearly wanting to serve their country, contribute their expertise? Why were they so systematically suppressed or effectively forced out of direct decision-making?
The underlying reasons are quite revealing. Speak to a systemic pathology. These individuals, and others like them, are perceived as too smart to manipulate, too outspoken to control, too ethical to corrupt, too globally credible to allow convenient political lies or manufactured narratives. They fundamentally challenge prevailing narratives, the established order, because their critiques are based on logic, data, truth. They don't flatter power, don't hide behind religion or nationalism to justify problematic policies, insist on merit, accountability.
They're seen as a threat.
Exactly. They pose a direct, unyielding threat to the established order, the opaque ways of power. The response, often consistent. Marginalization, public mockery, ultimately, attempted erasure from influential discourse and decision-making. Creates an environment where intellectual independence is a liability, not an asset.
That's a really sobering thought. Competence treated as a threat. What's fascinating here is the message this sends about a nation treating competence as a threat and compliance as its highest virtue. It raises a huge, almost existential question. Can a nation truly lead the world, realize its full potential, if it consistently punishes its own brightest minds, suppresses independent thought?
That is indeed the core paradox, deeply troubling. If a nation's best minds, highly educated, globally respected, committed to progress, are consistently ignored, banned from TV, trolled viciously, or forced out, then the problem isn't the individuals. The problem is systemic within the nation, suggests a fundamental flaw, where competence, critical thinking, independence are viewed with suspicion, where adherence to the party line, established interests is valued above all. Until India learns to reward truth over theatrics, ideas over identity, courage over compliance, its brightest, most ethical minds will continue to leave or be sidelined. And in that scenario, the grand dream of a world-leading India, a superpower punching its weight, regrettably remains just that, a powerful yet unfulfilled dream.
Let's shift gears slightly to another stark observation about India, one bridging intellectual brilliance with practical, everyday realities. There's a difficult truth. Friends owe each other. How can a nation overflowing with intellectual genius, capable of incredible scientific feats, also tolerate some of the most physically challenging, frankly unhygienic living conditions on Earth?
This is a truly stark, often bewildering paradox. Many observers grapple with it. Walk through Indian university campuses, IITs, smaller schools, you find minds brimming with groundbreaking ideas. Quantum physics, complex coding, advanced math, undeniable intellectual brilliance. But then, step outside these enclaves. The immediate physical environment is a jarring contrast. Pervasive dust, plastic clogging drains, mountains of garbage on streets, open fields, a suffocating smog hanging heavy.
Even inside institutions sometimes.
Yes, even inside some respected institutions, you find deteriorating infrastructure, poor restrooms, inadequate ventilation. Leads to the unsettling realization. India masters quantum physics, sends rockets to Mars, but struggles profoundly with basic municipal garbage collection, still dumps raw sewage in sacred rivers, a disconnect between high-level achievement and foundational civic management. The why here isn't lack of intelligence, it's a profound, systemic lack of functional, accountable civic systems. It's not that individual Indians are unaware, they're acutely aware, but underlying systems are often broken. Incentives for civic action, accountability are misaligned, a pervasive sense that individual efforts won't be sustained or rewarded. Everyone waits for someone else. This collective inertia, combined with decades of corrupt governance, broken accountability, maybe misplaced pride, equating criticism with disloyalty, has conditioned people to normalize the filth. The phrase, "Yay, India, hi, this is India," has tragically become both a resigned excuse for inaction and quiet acceptance, perpetuating the problem.
That phrase, "Yay, India, hi," as an explanation. Quite telling. This raises an important question. What's the tangible, undeniable cost of this pervasive environmental reality, particularly on its own citizens, their long-term health?
The cost is staggering. borne most heavily by the populace, especially children. India is home to an alarming 22 of the 30 most polluted cities globally, according to reports. PM 2.5 levels fine particulate matter penetrating deep into lungs, bloodstream in many regions, especially North India, routinely 5 to 10 times above WHO safe limits.
5 to 10 times.
It's severe, immediate long-term health implications. Children growing up in this develop impaired lung function. Chronic coughing is normalized. Parents don't see it as a symptom. Asthma inhalers distressingly widespread, almost standard childhood accessory for many. The true paradox. Parents themselves. Many highly educated engineers, doctors, IT pros, people working for top global firms. Yet they send kids to schools without proper ventilation, often near burning trash dumps beside polluted roads. Kids inhale deadly air daily. For many, grim reality. No immediate affordable choice. But for others, a more profound tragedy. They've simply stopped believing fundamental change in their environment is possible. This normalization of severe environmental degradation has profound long-term health, societal consequences, compromises the nation's future human capital.
That's incredibly disheartening. And this environmental reality brings us full circle, back to the brain drain. So just leaving India isn't just about professional opportunity, is it? It's also about a fundamental desire for basic quality of life.
Absolutely. Pursuit of better quality of life is a significant, often unspoken, profoundly personal driver behind brain drain. The best and brightest leaving aren't solely seeking advanced professional opportunities, though that's a draw, often seeking something more fundamental, something that should be a given. Clean air without a constant cough, clean sidewalks without navigating trash, trusted clean tap water without expensive filters. They genuinely struggle to imagine raising kids where basic public hygiene, health aren't guaranteed, but require privilege or constant vigilance instead of being a societal standard. So they migrate U.S., Canada, Europe, Australia, and there, maybe for the first time, they experience a simple, profound truth. You don't need to be rich to breathe clean air, don't need wealth for a clean environment, reliable infrastructure, trusted public services. You just need working systems. This stark contrast highlights that systemic efficiency, accountability, prioritizing public good aren't luxuries. They're fundamental pillars, crucial for retaining talent, attracting investment, improving national well-being. When these basics are missing, talent inevitably seeks environments where they exist.
That's a powerful summation. India clearly doesn't lack IQ. It lacks institutional hygiene literally and figuratively. It needs civic courage, accountable governance, citizens who don't passively wait, leaders prioritizing basic services with the same pride as space launches.
That sums it up perfectly. The issue isn't deficiency in intellect or capability. Indians are brilliant, resourceful. Problem lies squarely in systemic failure to translate that into effective, clean, accountable institutions, public services. For India to progress, realize global aspirations, it desperately needs a surge of civic courage. Citizens willing to demand better, hold leaders accountable, actively participate in improving communities, not passively wait or accept, requires truly accountable governance. Officials genuinely answerable. Corruption not tolerated but actively investigated, punished. Public funds for public good, not private gain. And critically, leaders demonstrating the same pride in ensuring basic services, garbage collection, clean water, functional infrastructure, as they do for ambitious tech feats like space launches. Without addressing this fundamental lack of institutional hygiene, India's enormous potential remains perpetually trapped by persistent internal challenges.
So given all we've discussed, what happens when someone dares to point out these profound issues, the dirty streets, corrupt leaders, flawed systems? What's the typical response in India when uncomfortable truths are voiced?
That's where the noise comes in, a critical dynamic. There's a pervasive sentiment, especially in media, public discourse, often drowning out critical self-reflection. The saying, beware of the noise. Not every voice that praises you is your friend, and not every voice that challenges you is your enemy, captures it perfectly. In today's India media landscape online, volume of immediate emotional reaction often supersedes substance. Someone points out a problem, dirty streets, corrupt leaders, flawed systems. The immediate response is rarely curiosity, thoughtful consideration, commitment to address it. Instead, often visceral defensiveness, accusation of disloyalty. Critics met with, "Oh, you said something negative, you must hate us." Or, "You mentioned corruption, you must be anti-national." Effectively deflects from the critique, silences dissent by branding it unpatriotic, malicious. The uncomfortable truth. Sometimes true friends show you the mirror, even if it's unflattering. Enemies might tell you you're glowing, even as you rot. This emotional, often nationalistic response creates an environment where genuine, constructive criticism, vital for growth, becomes incredibly difficult to deliver or receive without backlash. Prioritizes superficial image over substantive self-improvement.
This suggests a certain paradox, doesn't it? This is a new India, outwardly confident, projecting strengths globally. Yet beneath that veneer, perhaps quite fragile within, struggling with a fundamental inability to accept self-criticism, a country with space missions, global CEOs, yet still battling fundamental issues like pervasive filth, entrenched corruption.
It's absolutely a profound dichotomy. You've hit a crucial point about internal fragility. This new India projects immense confidence, globally impressive space missions, thriving startups, diaspora-leading global corporations. Yet beneath this veneer, undeniably fragile within, especially in capacity for self-reflection, accountability. A country where magnificent flyovers often have filth below, kids breathe poisoned air, smart young people find themselves led by officials facing serious criminal charges. Consider the Indian parliament itself. Over 40% of members reportedly face criminal charges, according to independent analyses. Many disturbingly uneducated, beyond retirement age, widely seen as deeply corrupt. Yet, strikingly, they win elections again and again.
Why does this happen?
Why? Justice often delayed till irrelevant, cases drag decades. The corrupt, not routinely punished, often promoted. Individuals with serious criminal records aren't disqualified, they are elected. Perpetuates a system where accountability is scarce, integrity often not required for power, rule of law selectively applied. Creates deep cynicism, environment where ethical governance struggles.
That's a truly concerning statistic, over 40%. Raises an even deeper, more provocative question. The leaders may be corrupt, but why do Indian citizens tolerate this? What's truly behind the voters' silence or their consistent choice to elect such individuals?
That is truly the million-dollar question. Speaks to deeper societal, political conditioning over decades. Several potential intercepting reasons, no single simple answer. Are citizens too poor to rebel? Caught in daily survival, no bandwidth for demanding systemic change? Too uneducated, disempowered to grasp long-term implications, effectively demand better, too busy surviving? Or perhaps too addicted to identity politics, voting on caste, religion, region to prioritize ethics, competence, performance. These deep loyalties can override rational judgment about governance. And then a more troubling possibility. Societal conditioning. Perhaps taught over generations not to question authority, but obey. Worship symbols, charismatic figures, not seek truth, demand accountability. Vote on emotion, tribal allegiance, not ethics, competence, vision. This long-term conditioning could be a significant factor in voter silence, inadvertently perpetuating the very system holding them, their nation back. A cycle incredibly difficult to break.
That analysis really makes you think about civic responsibility. Connecting this to the bigger picture, it truly begs a crucial redefinition of patriotism. What does it really mean to love your country in a context like this? Cheering every success or demanding accountability for every failure?
This is fundamental, a redefinition India desperately needs. True patriotism in this context isn't blind worship, uncritically applauding government actions. It means questioning everything that doesn't work, holds the nation back, roads broken. True love demands they be fixed, holds those responsible accountable, leaders corrupt. Love compels voting them out, not protecting them. Air poisoned, kids suffering. True patriotism means raising hell, demanding action, protecting the future. It's about a profound shift. Stop protecting your politicians. Start fiercely protecting your children, their future. Stop fearing the truth. Start demanding fundamental change, even when uncomfortable.
The enemy isn't the critic.
The real enemy isn't the critic. The outsider pointing out flaws, the intellectual speaking truth to power. The real enemy is the insider benefiting from silence, broken systems, actively suppressing truth for personal gain. India doesn't need more empty praise, needs more courage from citizens to demand better, doesn't need more flags online, needs more fire in the belly to fight for a truly better future, built on accountability, integrity.
India is not weak. Its people certainly not weak.
Yeah.
But what you've laid out suggests its political will, its civic spine, its sense of urgency are profoundly on life support. This deep dive has been about understanding, but also, hopefully, inspiring courage. A sleeping giant stays powerful only until it sleeps too long.
And that's the ultimate caution for a nation with such immense potential. India's raw potential, vast human capital, vibrant culture, democratic aspirations is undeniable. But without revitalized political will prioritizing national good, a stronger civic spine demanding accountability, a profound sense of urgency to address deep systemic flaws, that potential remains largely dormant. A sleeping giant, however powerful, risks oversleeping, missing its critical moment. The call is for awakening, decisive action, commitment to self-improvement matching its grand ambitions.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've covered a huge amount today, from tangible trade barriers, geopolitical tensions defining part of the U.S.-India relationship, to deep-seated internal issues, corruption, corporate struggles, brain drain, the critical need for systemic change within India. It's a complex, often challenging picture, isn't it? The friction points are real, significant, internal issues deeply ingrained. But the U.S. and India remain deeply connected, strategic interests, cultural ties.
It absolutely is complex, but clarity is essential for understanding global dynamics. We've seen how India's high tariffs, NTBs, Russia ties create friction with the U.S., but perhaps the most profound, debilitating challenge: institutionalized corruption, pervasive unpredictability making business so hard, driving away talent. The core issue isn't India's incredible people. They are its greatest asset: ingenuity, drive. Problem lies in systems rewarding loyalty over merit, protecting inefficiency, elevating caste over competence, delaying justice while rewarding the corrupt. These structures compromise India's competitiveness, ability to realize its potential. However, true friendships, like between nations, are resilient. They survive tough conversations because they're built on a foundation that withstands honesty. We still believe in India, its people, the possibility of an honest partnership. Still believe something transformative can emerge if civic courage trumps political convenience, if long-term vision triumphs over short-sighted vote bank politics. India's potential is immense if it embraces profound internal change.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a powerful reminder. Great nations aren't built by flattery, ignoring uncomfortable truths. They're built by honesty, courage to look inward, friends daring to show the mirror, even when it's hard. So as you reflect on this deep dive, consider this. What is the true ultimate measure of a nation's strength? Is it just GDP, military might, or its ability to look inward with integrity, address its deepest flaws, truly nurture and empower its brightest minds, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what uncomfortable truths they might speak? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, not just with your ears, but with your minds and hearts. Until next time.